Get back to the kitchen where you belong." The words cut through the humid Georgia air like a blade, dripping with the kind of contempt that comes from men who mistake volume for authority. Staff Sergeant Mike Crawford barely looked up from his clipboard at Fort Stewart's security checkpoint, his weathered face twisted into a sneer that had become his trademark. The woman standing before him clutched a manila folder against her chest, her khaki uniform pressed to perfection despite the early morning humidity. Her name tag read Martinez, but to Crawford, she was just another headache in a career full of them. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. She had approached his desk with the measured steps of someone who had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her mind, knowing the reception she would receive but coming anyway because duty demanded it. Her dark eyes held an intensity that should have given him pause, but Crawford was too busy playing to his audience of junior MPs who hung on his every word like gospel. The folder in her hands contained 3 weeks of careful observation, documented patterns, and a growing certainty that something was terribly wrong on their base. But Crawford didn't want to hear about problems. He wanted easy shifts and early retirement. "This is a military installation, not some detective show," he continued, his voice growing louder as more personnel gathered to witness what was becoming a public humiliation. "Why don't you stick to inventory reports and leave the real security work to the professionals?" Each word was carefully chosen to wound, designed to send her scurrying back to the supply depot where he believed she belonged. The gathered MPs laughed on cue, their voices creating a chorus of mockery that echoed through the security building. Maria Elena Martinez stood perfectly still, her spine straight with the kind of military bearing that spoke of years of discipline and training. Her grip tightened on the folder, knuckles showing white against her brown skin, but she didn't retreat, didn't argue, didn't give Crawford the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she looked at him with a patience that made something in his chest shift uncomfortably, though he was too proud and too stupid to acknowledge what his instincts were trying to tell him. But Crawford couldn't see what lay beneath her carefully controlled exterior. He didn't know that he was about to learn why still waters run deepest, why quiet professionals often accomplish what loud amateurs cannot. He had no idea that the woman he was dismissing had spent the last 3 weeks documenting something that would shake the very foundations of base security, something that his own department had missed entirely despite all their bluster and bravado. What would you do if you discovered a threat that everyone else refused to see? Have you ever been ignored when you knew something was critically wrong? The questions hang in the air like smoke from a distant fire, invisible but impossible to ignore once you catch the scent. Maria Martinez appears to be exactly what Crawford believes her to be, a simple supply clerk who has wandered out of her lane and into business that doesn't concern her. Her Toyota Camry sits in the enlisted parking lot with its reliable engine and carefully maintained interior, a testament to someone who takes care of what she has because she knows the value of everything she owns. She works in Building 47, managing inventory and logistics for the base supply depot, surrounded by shelves of equipment and forms that most soldiers find mind-numbingly boring. Her colleagues know her as the woman who always has the right form, who can locate any item in the vast warehouse system, and who stays late to ensure that every soldier gets what they need. Her apartment off base is modest but comfortable, furnished with pieces that will last, and decorated with photographs of family members who serve or have served in various branches of the military. The neighbors in her complex see her as the quiet woman who waters the small herb garden on her balcony each morning and reads thick novels in the evening, someone who seems to blend into the background of their suburban lives. But beneath this carefully maintained normalcy lies a heritage that would command respect from even the most decorated officers if they knew to look for it. Her father was Army Intelligence Colonel Roberto Martinez, a man who spent 25 years in the shadows, tracking threats that most people never knew existed. He died when Maria was 22, officially of a heart attack, though the timing came just weeks after he had been investigating a network of foreign agents operating on American soil. The official report spoke of natural causes and a military funeral with full honors, but Maria had found his personal notes hidden in a safety deposit box, encrypted observations about patterns of behavior and security breaches that painted a picture of systematic infiltration. Her mother, Dr. Isabella Santos Martinez, had been a civilian contractor for the Defense Intelligence Agency, a linguist and analyst who specialized in identifying deception through behavioral patterns and linguistic tells. Isabella had trained Maria from childhood, not in weapons or tactics, but in something far more subtle and perhaps more dangerous: the art of observation, the science of pattern recognition, the ability to see what others missed because they were looking in the wrong direction. Real intelligence work isn't about dramatic confrontations, Isabella would tell her daughter during their evening walks around their neighborhood. It's about noticing when the mailman changes his route, when the same car appears too many times, when people's stories don't quite match their actions. Maria's grandfather had been Master Sergeant Eduardo Santos, a military policeman who served in Korea and Vietnam, a man who taught Isabella everything about reading people and situations before disappearing on what was officially listed as a training accident. 3 generations of intelligence gathering flowed through Maria's veins, yet she had chosen the path of anonymity, working in supply where she could observe the entire base without drawing attention to herself. The decision to remain in the background had been deliberate, made after her father's death when she realized that the family tradition of service had come with a price that each generation had paid in full. She had seen too many intelligence officers burn out or burn up, too many families destroyed by the weight of secrets and the burden of seeing threats that others couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. Maria's apartment holds secrets that would astound those who know her, only as a supply clerk. A computer system that monitors multiple intelligence databases through carefully maintained civilian access points, reference books on counterintelligence techniques that she has memorized cover to cover, and her father's encrypted files that she has spent years decoding word by word. She practices her observational skills during her daily routine, cataloging behaviors and noting anomalies with the same precision she brings to inventory management. The triggering event that brought her to Crawford's attention had started 6 weeks ago, when she noticed discrepancies in supply requests that didn't quite make sense. Small things at first, requisitions for equipment that seemed slightly outside normal parameters, timing that didn't match operational schedules, patterns that her trained eye recognized as potentially significant even when others dismissed them as clerical errors. Her investigation had begun with the kind of patient, methodical approach her mother had taught her, tracking serial numbers and cross-referencing delivery schedules with personnel assignments. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Someone was systematically acquiring equipment and information that could only serve one purpose, and that purpose had nothing to do with legitimate military operations. The evidence she had compiled painted a picture of careful, professional infiltration carried out by someone with intimate knowledge of base procedures and security protocols. Equipment disappearing from manifests, security cameras developing convenient blind spots, personnel records being accessed by someone with administrative privileges but no operational need. The pattern was subtle, sophisticated, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Maria's true motive for approaching Crawford wasn't career advancement or personal glory, but a growing certainty that Fort Stewart was being systematically compromised by someone with the access and knowledge to do catastrophic damage. She had tried to report her concerns through proper channels, but her immediate supervisor had dismissed her observations as overthinking and told her to focus on her assigned duties. The scar on her right wrist from a childhood accident throbs as she grips the folder containing weeks of careful documentation. Her father's watch, inherited after his death, ticks steadily against her pulse, a reminder of the legacy she carries and the responsibility that comes with the ability to see what others miss. She has perfect recall for details that others forget, speaks softly but with unshakable conviction, and carries a small silver cross given to her by her grandmother, hidden beneath her uniform where it rests against her heart. Crawford's dismissal isn't just about her rank or her assignment. It's about everything her family has sacrificed to protect, about the very security he claims to maintain but clearly doesn't understand. The intelligence genes that run through her bloodline are screaming warnings that he refuses to hear, patterns that she can see as clearly as words on a page, but that his preconceptions blind him to completely. Staff Sergeant Crawford stands 45 years old and bitter, a career military policeman with a chip on his shoulder about anyone who doesn't fit his narrow definition of what a soldier should be. His promotion to staff sergeant had taken longer than he wanted, creating a resentment that he takes out on anyone he perceives as stepping outside their assigned role. His subordinates, Corporal Jackson and Private First Class Williams, encourage his behavior with their laughter, feeding his need to feel superior to someone, anyone, in a career that has repeatedly reminded him that he's not quite good enough for the assignments he wanted. "Look, sweetheart," Crawford continues, his voice dripping with condescension as he plays to his growing audience. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. This isn't some conspiracy movie. Real security work takes years of training, experience, balls. You probably think you can Nancy Drew your way into the big leagues. The insults are designed to wound, to send her running back to her warehouse where she can count boxes and stay out of grown-up business." But Maria remains silent, her posture shifting almost imperceptibly as her feet move to shoulder-width apart, weight distributing evenly in a stance that speaks of training most people wouldn't expect from a supply clerk. Her breathing remains controlled despite the provocation, chest rising and falling, with the measured rhythm of someone who has learned to manage stress through technique rather than emotion. The betting among the gathered MPs begins almost immediately, Crawford announcing loudly that if Maria can produce even one piece of credible evidence of a security threat, he'll personally walk her report up to the commanding officer himself. If she can't, she agrees to stop wasting everyone's time with her paranoid fantasies and stick to what she knows best, counting inventory and filing reports. The gathered soldiers laugh and start placing informal bets on how quickly she'll back down, their voices creating a crescendo of cruel anticipation that fills the security building. Maria nods quietly, her voice steady as she asks, "Can I access the security database to cross-reference my findings?" The question surprises them because most supply clerks wouldn't know what databases exist, much less how to use them for investigative purposes. Sergeant First Class Angela Rodriguez watches from the corner of the room, her discomfort growing with each passing moment. Rodriguez is 35 years old, a combat veteran with deployment experience who remembers being dismissed early in her career simply because others couldn't see past their preconceptions. She recognizes something in Maria's stillness that the men miss, a quality that speaks of preparation and knowledge rather than confusion or fear. "Maybe we should hear what she has to say," Rodriguez interjects diplomatically, her voice cutting through the laughter with the authority of someone who has earned her stripes through performance rather than politics. Crawford waves her off without even looking in her direction, his attention fixed on what he sees as easy prey. "Stay out of this, Rodriguez. I'm teaching this clerk about how the real military works." When Crawford mentions Nancy Drew, Maria's hand instinctively moves to her father's watch, the metal warm against her skin as she remembers his funeral, the flag folded with military precision, her mother's tears falling like rain on the polished casket. The sergeant's mockery isn't just about her capabilities or her assignment. It's about her father's sacrifice, her mother's service, her grandfather's legacy of protecting others, even when they didn't know they needed protection. Small details begin to accumulate like evidence building toward an inevitable conclusion. Maria's breathing remains controlled despite the public humiliation, her posture maintaining the kind of military bearing that speaks of deep training rather than recent instruction. She automatically scans the room, noting exit points and the positioning of potential allies and opponents with the systematic approach of someone who has been taught to assess situations professionally. Her knowledge of base procedures becomes apparent as she references specific regulation numbers and security protocols, surprising Crawford with information that most supply clerks wouldn't possess. Her grip on the folder demonstrates familiarity with classified document handling, fingers positioned with the precision of someone who has been trained in proper security procedures. The crowd grows as word spreads through the building, like wildfire, off-duty personnel gathering to witness what they expect to be entertainment, at the expense of someone who has clearly overstepped her bounds. Some begin recording with their phones, already composing messages about the supply clerk who thought she could play detective with the military police. Crawford plays to his expanding audience, making increasingly crude comments about Maria's appearance and qualifications, each joke designed to get a bigger laugh than the last, while establishing his dominance over someone he sees as clearly out of her depth. The performance feeds his ego while reinforcing the hierarchy that keeps him feeling important, despite his limited authority. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez notices Maria's subtle professional, tells that the men miss completely. The way she holds herself speaks of confidence earned through experience rather than bravado learned through posturing. Her reference to specific procedures and protocols demonstrates knowledge that goes far beyond what her current assignment would require. Her calm acceptance of the challenge speaks of someone who has been in difficult situations before and emerged successfully. Rodriguez has seen enough soldiers to recognize the difference between someone who talks about security and someone who understands it at a fundamental level, between someone who has read about investigations and someone who has conducted them. The signs are subtle but unmistakable to anyone with the experience to interpret them correctly. The security office falls silent as Maria steps forward to present her evidence, 3 weeks of careful documentation seeming insignificant against the wall of skepticism and mockery she faces. Crawford smirks, already composing his victory speech, already planning how he'll tell this story to his drinking buddies, as another example of civilians who don't understand how the military really works. What he doesn't see is the way Maria's hands remain steady as she opens the folder, not from nervousness, but from the weight of absolute certainty. In her mind, 3 voices compete for attention. Her father's steady command to follow the evidence wherever it leads, her mother's whispered advice to never reveal more than necessary, and her own determination asking whether she has the courage to see this through regardless of the consequences. The weight of the folder feels like the weight of her entire bloodline. Every Martinez and Santos who ever served in uniform or carried a badge in service to something larger than themselves. Maria closes her eyes for a moment, not in prayer but in preparation, calling up every lesson her parents had taught her about persistence in the face of institutional resistance. In her mind, she sees her father's photograph in dress uniform, the commendations he earned but never displayed, the encrypted files that detailed threats most people never knew existed. She hears her mother's voice echoing from countless evening discussions about the importance of paying attention to details that others dismiss. But mostly she feels the crushing responsibility of 3 generations of service members who had dedicated their lives to protecting others, their legacy now resting on her shoulders like a mantle she never asked to wear. When she opens her eyes, the internal storm settles into deadly calm, the uncertain supply clerk disappearing as if she never existed. In her place stands an investigator with 3 generations of training flowing through her blood, a professional forged in secret and tempered by loss. The first piece of evidence comes without hesitation, a requisition form that appears normal to untrained eyes, but contains subtle anomalies that speak volumes to someone who knows what to look for. Maria's voice remains calm as she explains the significance of serial number discrepancies, equipment requests that don't match operational requirements, and timing patterns that suggest coordination with external factors. Her presentation is methodical, professional, and utterly convincing to anyone willing to listen with an open mind. Crawford's confident smile begins to falter as he realizes that the evidence she's presenting isn't the amateur paranoia he expected, but something far more substantial and potentially dangerous. The laughter from his audience grows uncertain as Maria continues her presentation, each piece of evidence building on the last, to create a picture that becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss. What started as entertainment at the expense of an overreaching supply clerk begins to transform into something that might actually require serious attention. The shift is subtle but unmistakable, like the moment when a crowd realizes that what they thought was a performance might actually be real, and that reality carries implications none of them had considered. Maria continues her presentation with the patience of someone who has spent years learning to communicate complex information to people who don't want to hear it. Her second piece of evidence involves security camera footage that shows equipment being moved during shift changes, timing that suggests intimate knowledge of personnel's schedules and security protocols. The movements appear routine to casual observation, but Maria's analysis reveals patterns that point to systematic acquisition of sensitive materials. The room grows quieter as she explains how requisition signatures have been forged, using administrative access that should be restricted to senior personnel, forgeries sophisticated enough to pass casual inspection but showing microscopic inconsistencies that her trained eye had detected through patient comparison with known authentic samples. Her knowledge of document analysis techniques surprises everyone present, revealing expertise that has nothing to do with supply management. Crawford finds himself in the uncomfortable position of realizing that his public humiliation of Maria might have been premature, but his ego prevents him from acknowledging the mistake directly. Instead, he doubles down, demanding to know where a supply clerk learned about document analysis and security procedures, implying that her knowledge itself is somehow suspicious or inappropriate. Maria's response reveals the depth of her background without compromising operational security. explaining that her father had been career military and that she had grown up around discussions of security protocols and threat assessment. Her matter-of-fact delivery makes it clear that this knowledge comes from legitimate sources and years of exposure to professional-level security thinking. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez steps forward, recognizing that the situation has moved beyond hazing and into potentially serious territory. Her questions are professional and probing, designed to test the validity of Maria's analysis without the personal hostility that Crawford has injected into the proceedings. Rodriguez's intervention provides Maria with the first sign that someone in authority might actually be willing to listen to what she has discovered. The evidence continues to mount as Maria presents her findings with the systematic approach her mother had taught her, building her case piece by piece until the pattern becomes undeniable. Equipment manifests that don't match delivery records. Personnel access logs that show administrative privileges being used during off hours. Communication intercepts that suggest coordination with external parties. Each piece of evidence individually might be explainable as clerical error or coincidence, but together they create a picture of systematic infiltration that becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss. Maria's presentation demonstrates not just the ability to notice anomalies, but the analytical skills necessary to connect disparate pieces of information into a coherent threat assessment. The transformation in the room is palpable as the audience begins to realize that they are witnessing something significant rather than the amateur hour they had expected. Phones that had been recording for entertainment begin capturing something that might actually be important. Evidence of a security breach that could have implications far beyond the walls of this single building. Crawford's position becomes increasingly untenable as the quality of Maria's evidence makes his dismissive attitude look less like professional skepticism and more like willful blindness. His attempts to regain control of the situation only serve to highlight how thoroughly he has underestimated both the threat and the person who discovered it. The weight of 3 generations of service flows through Maria's presentation as she methodically dismantles every objection and addresses every concern with the patience of someone who has spent weeks preparing for exactly this moment. Her father's training in pattern recognition, her mother's expertise in behavioral analysis, and her grandfather's understanding of institutional resistance combine to create a presentation that is both comprehensive and convincing. Rodriguez asks the questions that Crawford should have asked from the beginning, treating Maria's concerns with the professional respect they deserve while probing for weaknesses in her analysis. The contrast between Rodriguez's approach and Crawford's hostility becomes increasingly apparent to everyone in the room, highlighting the difference between genuine security consciousness and territorial defensiveness. As Maria reaches the culmination of her presentation, the final piece of evidence that ties everything together, the room falls into complete silence. What she reveals will force everyone present to confront the possibility that their base has been systematically compromised, that their security measures have been penetrated by someone with the knowledge and access necessary to do catastrophic damage. The moment of revelation approaches like a storm on the horizon, visible to those who know how to read the signs but still capable of surprising those who have been looking in the wrong direction. Maria's voice remains steady as she prepares to present the evidence that will transform her from dismissed supply clerk to the person who may have prevented a catastrophic security breach. Her father's watch ticks steadily against her wrist, marking time toward a moment that will validate everything her family had taught her about the importance of paying attention to details that others miss. The legacy of 3 generations of service members who had dedicated their lives to protecting others reaches its culmination in this humid Georgia security office, where one woman's careful observations are about to expose a threat that everyone else had missed. The photograph hits Crawford's desk with the soft sound of certainty meeting denial. Staff Sergeant Kevin Walsh, photographed entering Building 12 at 0347 hours, carrying equipment that according to official records should have been secured in the armory. Maria's voice cuts through the stunned silence like a scalpel through tissue. This was taken 4 nights ago by the exterior camera that supposedly malfunctioned during the shift change. The image shows Walsh clearly, his face illuminated by the security lighting as he uses what appears to be a master key to access areas far beyond his clearance level. The timestamp is unmistakable, the location undeniable, and the implications staggering. Crawford stares at the photograph, as if it might transform into something less damaging if he looks hard enough. But the evidence remains stubbornly factual. Walsh has been stationed at Fort Stewart for 18 months. arriving with impeccable references and a service record that seemed almost too perfect in retrospect. Maria's investigation had revealed subtle inconsistencies in his background that became glaring red flags once she knew what to look for. Training certifications from schools that had no record of his attendance. Previous assignments at bases where personnel records had been mysteriously corrupted. Commendations signed by officers who claimed no memory of recommending him. The room erupts in whispered conversations as the implications begin to sink in. If Walsh is compromised, then everything he's had access to during his time on base must be considered potentially leaked. Security protocols, personnel information, operational schedules, equipment manifests, all of it flowing through channels that lead to destinations no one wants to contemplate. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez immediately moves to her communications console, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she initiates security protocols that should have been activated weeks ago if anyone had been paying attention to the patterns Maria had identified. Her professional training takes over, recognizing that they are no longer dealing with paranoid speculation but with an active security breach that requires immediate containment. Crawford finds himself trapped between his ego and the growing realization that his dismissal of Maria's concerns may have allowed a foreign operative to continue compromising base security for weeks longer than necessary. The evidence is too substantial to dismiss, too detailed to explain away as coincidence or misunderstanding. His authority, which he had used as a weapon against Maria, now becomes a liability that could end his career if his negligence contributed to a security disaster. Maria continues her presentation with methodical precision, each new piece of evidence building on the last, to create an overwhelming case for immediate action. She produces surveillance footage showing Walsh's movements throughout the base, always during periods when his presence would attract minimal attention, always with perfect knowledge of security rotations and blind spots that should have been classified information. The pattern of his activities reveals sophisticated tradecraft that goes far beyond anything a legitimate soldier would need to know. Dead drops in locations that provide perfect concealment while allowing easy access for external contacts. Communication methods that bypass standard military channels. Acquisition of equipment that serves no legitimate training or operational purpose, but would be invaluable for intelligence gathering or sabotage operations. Rodriguez coordinates with base communications to trace Walsh's current location while simultaneously alerting the command structure to the potential security breach. Her movements are efficient and professional, demonstrating the kind of competence that should have been applied to Maria's initial concerns if Crawford had been capable of seeing past his own prejudices. The base begins to lock down as word spreads through secure channels, security personnel moving to predetermined positions while commanders assess the scope of the potential breach. The response is swift and comprehensive, but it comes weeks later than it should have if Maria's observations had been taken seriously from the beginning. Crawford's attempts to regain control of the situation only serve to highlight how completely he has failed in his primary responsibility. His questions are defensive rather than investigative, focused more on protecting his reputation than on understanding the full extent of the security compromise. The contrast between his approach and Rodriguez's professional response becomes increasingly apparent to everyone present. Maria produces additional evidence that demonstrates the scope of Walsh's access to sensitive information. Computer logs showing administrative queries that had no legitimate operational purpose. Database searches that suggest intelligence gathering rather than routine military business. Communication patterns that indicate coordination with external handlers operating beyond the reach of military surveillance. The sophistication of the operation becomes clear as Maria explains how Walsh had systematically mapped the base's security vulnerabilities, identifying weaknesses in both physical and electronic systems that could be exploited for various purposes. His activities suggest long-term planning and coordination with professional intelligence operatives who understand military systems at a fundamental level. Rodriguez's investigation confirms Maria's findings while uncovering additional evidence that had been overlooked by routine security procedures. Walsh's financial records show subtle irregularities that suggest compensation from sources beyond his military pay. Transactions carefully structured to avoid triggering automated fraud detection systems but revealing clear patterns to trained analysis. The realization spreads through the security office that they are dealing with a sophisticated espionage operation rather than simple security negligence or opportunistic crime. The implications extend far beyond Fort Stewart, suggesting a broader network of compromise that could affect multiple installations and thousands of personnel. Crawford's position becomes increasingly untenable as the evidence mounts, and his initial dismissal of Maria's concerns looks less like professional skepticism and more like dangerous incompetence. His subordinates begin to distance themselves from his earlier mockery, recognizing that association with his failure of judgment could damage their own careers. Maria's presentation reaches its climax as she reveals the final piece of evidence that ties everything together into an undeniable pattern of systematic infiltration and compromise. The communications intercepts she had analyzed show coordination between Walsh and external handlers, using coded language that speaks to professional training and institutional support. The evidence demonstrates that Walsh's infiltration of Fort Stewart was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader intelligence operation designed to compromise multiple military installations simultaneously. The scope of the threat extends far beyond what anyone had imagined, transforming Maria's initial concerns into a national security crisis that requires immediate federal intervention. Rodriguez coordinates with higher command structures while initiating the protocols necessary to contain the breach and prevent further compromise. Her actions demonstrate the kind of professional competence that should have been applied to Maria's concerns from the beginning, highlighting the cost of Crawford's prejudice and institutional arrogance. The base's response accelerates as the full implications of the security breach become clear. Specialized counterintelligence teams are dispatched to coordinate the investigation, while security protocols are elevated to levels not seen since wartime conditions. The transformation from routine operations to crisis response happens with remarkable speed once the threat is properly recognized and addressed. Crawford's authority evaporates as senior officers arrive to take control of the situation, his earlier dismissal of Maria's concerns becoming a matter of official record that will follow him for the remainder of his career. The price of his prejudice and institutional blindness becomes clear as investigators begin to assess the full scope of the damage that might have been prevented if he had listened rather than mocked. Maria finds herself at the center of a rapidly expanding investigation as intelligence professionals recognize the quality of her analysis and the significance of her discoveries. Her background in pattern recognition and behavioral analysis becomes valuable assets in understanding the full scope of the espionage operation and identifying other potential threats. The manhunt for Walsh begins in earnest as security teams coordinate with federal agencies to track his movements and identify his contacts beyond the base. The operation reveals the sophisticated nature of the espionage network and the professional training of those involved, confirming Maria's analysis of the threat level and the urgency of the response required. Rodriguez takes charge of the immediate security response, while Crawford finds himself relegated to administrative duties pending a full investigation into his handling of the initial reports. His career hangs in the balance as investigators examine whether his negligence contributed to the scope of the security breach and the potential damage to national security. The evidence continues to mount as investigators uncover additional aspects of Walsh's activities that had gone undetected by routine security procedures. His infiltration appears to have been active for months before Maria's analysis identified the patterns that revealed his true purpose and affiliation. Maria's role transforms from dismissed supply clerk to key witness and consultant, as intelligence professionals recognize the value of her analytical skills and her understanding of the operational patterns that revealed the espionage operation. Her family's background in intelligence work becomes an asset rather than a curiosity, as investigators seek to understand how she was able to identify threats that had escaped official notice. The base continues its lockdown procedures as the investigation expands to identify other potential operatives and assess the full scope of the intelligence compromise. The response demonstrates the seriousness of the threat and the institutional recognition that Maria's concerns were not only legitimate, but critically important to national security. Crawford's humiliation becomes complete as senior officers review his handling of Maria's initial reports. His dismissive attitude captured on multiple phone recordings that will become evidence in the investigation of his professional conduct. The price of his prejudice extends beyond personal embarrassment to potential criminal negligence in the face of a national security threat. The investigation reveals that Walsh's operation was far more sophisticated than initially apparent, involving multiple levels of infiltration and compromise that suggest institutional support from hostile intelligence services. The scope of the threat validates Maria's persistent concerns and demonstrates the catastrophic consequences of dismissing legitimate security warnings due to institutional prejudice. Rodriguez's professional handling of the crisis response stands in stark contrast to Crawford's earlier negligence, highlighting the importance of treating security concerns with appropriate seriousness regardless of their source. Her actions help contain the immediate threat while preserving evidence necessary for the broader investigation. Maria watches as the base transforms around her, from a routine military installation to the center of a major counterintelligence operation. Her careful observations and patient analysis have uncovered a threat that could have compromised national security for months or years if it had remained undetected and unaddressed. The patterns she identified through weeks of careful observation now guide federal investigators as they work to understand the full scope of the espionage operation and identify other potential threats throughout the military system. Her analytical skills prove invaluable in understanding the sophisticated methods used by hostile intelligence services to penetrate American military installations. Crawford's career effectively ends as investigators determine that his dismissal of legitimate security concerns contributed to the scope of the intelligence breach. His prejudice and institutional arrogance have cost him everything he worked decades to achieve, while potentially compromising national security in ways that may take years to fully understand and address. The manhunt for Walsh intensifies as federal agencies coordinate to track his movements and identify his contacts beyond the military system. The operation reveals a sophisticated espionage network that has been actively working to compromise American military capabilities through carefully planned infiltration and intelligence gathering operations. Rodriguez assumes temporary command of base security operations as the investigation continues, her professional competence and appropriate response to the crisis earning recognition from senior command. Her actions help restore confidence in the security system while demonstrating the importance of treating legitimate concerns with appropriate seriousness. Maria's transformation from dismissed supply clerk to key intelligence asset reflects the broader lesson about the dangers of institutional prejudice and the importance of listening to legitimate concerns regardless of their source. Her patient persistence and analytical skills have potentially prevented a catastrophic compromise of national security that could have had implications far beyond Fort Stewart. The investigation continues to expand as federal agencies work to understand the full scope of the espionage operation and identify other potential threats throughout the military system. Maria's initial observations have sparked a comprehensive review of security procedures and threat detection systems across multiple installations. The capture happens at 0623 hours in a convenience store parking lot 30 miles from base, Walsh's hands shaking as federal agents surround his vehicle with practiced precision. Maria watches the takedown through the command center's monitors, her analytical work having predicted his exact escape route based on patterns she had identified in his previous movements. The man who had operated undetected for 18 months falls within 6 hours of his exposure, his sophisticated tradecraft useless against investigators who finally understand what they're looking for. Colonel Sandra Hayes arrives from Fort Benning as the sun rises over Georgia, her silver hair catching the early light as she strides into the command center with the controlled urgency of someone who has dealt with intelligence crises before. When she sees Maria standing beside the evidence boards, her expression shifts from professional concern to something approaching recognition, though she keeps her thoughts to herself for the moment. The interrogation reveals the scope of Walsh's operation in devastating detail. He had been recruited 3 years earlier during a training exercise in Eastern Europe, his financial difficulties making him vulnerable to approaches from intelligence operatives who understood exactly how to exploit American military personnel. His handlers had spent months preparing him for infiltration, teaching him to blend seamlessly into military culture, while systematically compromising everything he touched. Maria finds herself at the center of the expanding investigation, as federal agents recognize the quality of her analysis and request her assistance in understanding Walsh's operational patterns. Her ability to identify subtle anomalies in routine procedures proves invaluable as investigators work to determine the full extent of the intelligence compromise and identify potential additional threats. The evidence recovered from Walsh's quarters reveals a sophisticated intelligence operation that had been gathering information on military capabilities, personnel vulnerabilities, and operational procedures across multiple installations. His access to supply systems had allowed him to track equipment movements and identify security weaknesses that could be exploited for various purposes, ranging from sabotage to further infiltration. Colonel Hayes pulls Maria aside during a brief lull in the investigation, her voice quiet as she explains that Maria's mother had once saved her life during a classified operation in Afghanistan. The debt Hayes owes to the Martinez family extends beyond professional gratitude to something personal and profound, a connection that has influenced her rapid response to the crisis and her recognition of Maria's capabilities. The offer comes as intelligence agencies compete to recruit Maria for positions that would utilize her analytical skills and her understanding of military systems. The Defense Intelligence Agency wants her pattern recognition abilities. The FBI values her understanding of institutional vulnerabilities, and the CIA recognizes her potential for identifying threats that escape conventional detection methods. But Maria surprises everyone with her response, declining the prestigious positions that others would consider career-making opportunities. Instead, she requests assignment to a newly created position that would allow her to train military personnel in threat recognition and analytical thinking, teaching others to see what she sees rather than disappearing into the classified world of professional intelligence work. Her decision reflects the values her parents had instilled in her, the understanding that true service comes not from personal advancement, but from empowering others to protect themselves and their institutions. She chooses to remain visible and accessible, rather than vanishing into the shadows where her family had served for generations. The first training session takes place in the same security building where Crawford had humiliated her weeks earlier, but now the atmosphere reflects respect rather than mockery. Maria stands before a group of military police officers, intelligence personnel, and security specialists, teaching them to recognize the subtle signs that had allowed her to identify Walsh's operation before it could achieve its objectives. Crawford faces a general court-martial for dereliction of duty and conduct prejudicial to good order and discipline, his career ending in disgrace as investigators determine that his negligence directly contributed to the scope of the security breach. His dismissal of legitimate concerns had allowed a foreign operative to continue his activities for weeks beyond when he should have been detected and stopped. But Maria requests clemency for Crawford, arguing that his failures resulted from institutional blindness rather than malicious intent. Her intervention transforms what could have been a vindictive prosecution into an educational opportunity, with Crawford agreeing to participate in the new training program as both student and cautionary example. The program Maria develops emphasizes the importance of listening to concerns regardless of their source, teaching military personnel to overcome the prejudices and assumptions that had allowed Walsh's operation to succeed. Her methods focus on practical observation skills and systematic analysis, rather than relying on institutional hierarchies or personal biases to determine threat credibility. Rodriguez becomes Maria's closest collaborator in developing the training curriculum, her practical experience complementing Maria's analytical expertise to create a comprehensive approach to threat detection and security awareness. Together, they establish protocols that ensure legitimate concerns receive appropriate investigation regardless of who raises them or how they initially appear. The investigation expands to reveal a broader network of operatives who had been attempting to infiltrate multiple military installations using methods similar to Walsh's approach. Maria's analytical framework proves essential in identifying these additional threats, her understanding of operational patterns allowing investigators to recognize infiltration attempts that might otherwise have succeeded. Base security transforms under Maria's influence as personnel learn to apply her observational techniques to their daily routines. The culture shifts from reactive security measures to proactive threat identification, with soldiers at all levels contributing to a comprehensive awareness system that makes future infiltrations far more difficult to achieve. Crawford's participation in the training program becomes one of its most powerful components, as he shares his experience of how prejudice and ego can blind security personnel to legitimate threats. His public acknowledgement of his failures and his commitment to change serve as compelling testimony to the importance of institutional humility and professional growth. The success of Maria's training program attracts attention from military installations worldwide, with requests for her methods and curriculum coming from allies who recognize the universal nature of the threats she has learned to identify. Her approach becomes a model for military education systems that have struggled with similar vulnerabilities. 6 months after Walsh's capture, Maria receives recognition from the highest levels of military leadership for her role in exposing the espionage operation and developing countermeasures that protect against similar threats. The commendations acknowledge not just her analytical skills but her wisdom in choosing education over personal advancement. The base's security posture has been completely transformed through Maria's training initiatives, with personnel at all levels contributing to a comprehensive threat detection system that makes infiltration attempts visible long before they can achieve their objectives. The cultural change represents a fundamental shift in how military institutions approach security awareness and threat recognition. Crawford completes his participation in the training program as a changed man, his arrogance replaced by genuine humility and his prejudices overcome through direct exposure to the consequences of his former attitudes. His transformation serves as proof that institutional change is possible when people are willing to confront their failures and learn from their mistakes. Rodriguez earns promotion to Master Sergeant based on her professional handling of the crisis and her contributions to the new security protocols, her career advancing because she demonstrated the judgment and competence that Crawford had lacked. Her success validates the importance of merit-based advancement over political connections or personal prejudices. The network of operatives identified through Maria's analysis faces systematic dismantlement, as federal agencies apply her methods to expose infiltration attempts across multiple military installations. Her analytical framework becomes a standard tool for counterintelligence operations throughout the defense establishment. Maria's apartment remains modest, despite the recognition and opportunities that have come her way, her lifestyle unchanged by the prominence her discoveries have brought. She continues to tend her herb garden and read novels in the evening, maintaining the anonymity that allows her to move through the world while observing the patterns that others miss. The training facility established in her honor becomes a permanent fixture at Fort Stewart, with her methods integrated into standard military education curricula worldwide. The institutional changes she initiated represent a lasting transformation in how military organizations approach threat detection and security awareness. Her father's watch continues to tick steadily against her wrist as she conducts training sessions, the rhythm serving as a reminder of the legacy she carries and the responsibility that comes with the ability to see what others cannot. The lessons her parents taught her about observation and analysis have found their ultimate expression in protecting others from the threats they cannot yet recognize. Colonel Hayes ensures that Maria's contributions receive appropriate recognition without compromising the operational security that her work requires, balancing public acknowledgement with the discretion necessary for continued effectiveness. The recognition honors both Maria's individual achievements and the family tradition of service that made them possible. The success of Maria's approach demonstrates the importance of diverse perspectives in security operations, showing how someone outside traditional intelligence channels can identify threats that escape conventional detection methods. Her story becomes a case study in the value of inclusive approaches to national security challenges. The base continues to benefit from the cultural transformation Maria initiated, with security awareness becoming an integral part of daily operations rather than a separate function handled by specialized personnel. The comprehensive approach she developed creates multiple layers of protection that make infiltration attempts visible from numerous angles. Crawford's redemption becomes complete as he earns respect through his honest acknowledgement of past failures and his commitment to helping others avoid similar mistakes. His transformation demonstrates that institutional change is possible when individuals are willing to confront their prejudices and learn from their errors. The legacy of Maria's work extends far beyond the initial exposure of Walsh's operation, creating lasting changes in how military institutions approach security challenges and threat recognition. Her influence continues to protect countless personnel through the systems and training programs she established. Rodriguez's leadership of the ongoing security improvements validates Maria's faith in institutional change, proving that competent professionals can build upon initial discoveries to create comprehensive protective systems. Their collaboration demonstrates the power of combining analytical insight with practical implementation skills. The investigation concludes with the complete dismantlement of the espionage network that Walsh represented, but the systems Maria created continue to protect against future threats through ongoing vigilance and systematic analysis. Her contribution to national security extends far beyond the immediate crisis to include lasting improvements in defensive capabilities. Maria's choice to remain in her teaching role rather than pursuing prestigious intelligence positions reflects her understanding that lasting change comes through education rather than individual achievement. Her influence multiplies through every person she trains and every system she improves, creating protection that extends far beyond what any single analyst could achieve. The decision arrives on a Tuesday morning disguised as routine paperwork, but Maria recognizes the significance immediately. The Department of Defense wants to establish the Martinez Institute for Threat Recognition at Fort Stewart, a permanent facility dedicated to training military personnel in the analytical methods she has developed. The offer represents everything her family had avoided for 3 generations, the kind of public recognition that transforms private service into institutional legacy. In her modest apartment, Maria holds the official documents while staring at her father's photograph, weighing a choice that will define not just her future but the future of everyone who will benefit from the training she could provide. The institute would bear her family name, acknowledging publicly the contributions that previous generations had made in shadows and silence. It represents a chance to step fully into the light after decades of careful anonymity. The weight of the decision settles on her shoulders like her grandfather's old uniform, heavy with the accumulated service of everyone who came before her. She could accept the recognition, claim the legacy her family deserves, and establish a permanent institution that would protect countless personnel from threats they cannot yet see. The alternative is to continue her quiet work without fanfare, maintaining the anonymity that has protected her family for generations. Maria walks through Fort Stewart as she contemplates the choice, observing the changes her work has already created. Security personnel move with new awareness, their eyes trained to notice the subtle anomalies that she taught them to recognize. The cultural transformation is visible in every interaction, from the way guards check credentials to how personnel report unusual observations. Her influence has become woven into the fabric of daily operations. The young soldiers she has trained carry her lessons into their future assignments, spreading her methods throughout the military system like seeds scattered on fertile ground. Each person who learns her techniques becomes a multiplier of her influence, creating a network of awareness that extends far beyond any single installation or training program. The ripple effects of her teaching continue to expand with each passing month. Crawford approaches her during her evening walk around the base perimeter, his transformation complete in ways that still surprise those who knew him before. His arrogance has been replaced by genuine humility, his prejudices overcome through direct confrontation with the consequences of his former attitudes. He walks with the measured pace of someone who has learned to think before speaking, to listen before judging. "I never thanked you properly," he tells her as they walk past the security building where their initial confrontation had taken place, "not just for catching Walsh, but for giving me the chance to become better than I was." His words carry the weight of genuine gratitude mixed with the understanding that redemption requires daily recommitment to changed behavior. Maria's response reflects the grace her mother had taught her, the understanding that true strength lies not in crushing enemies but in transforming them into allies. "Everyone deserves the opportunity to grow beyond their mistakes," she tells him. The key is recognizing when growth is needed and being willing to do the work required to achieve it. Their conversation continues as they walk past the training facility that has become the center of her work, the building where dozens of military personnel have learned to see threats that would otherwise remain invisible. The lights in the classrooms reveal evening study sessions where soldiers practice the observation techniques that could save lives and protect national security. The Institute proposal would formalize everything she has built, creating a permanent structure that would survive personnel changes and budget fluctuations. It would ensure that her methods continue to protect future generations of military personnel, that the lessons learned from Walsh's infiltration are never forgotten or ignored. The permanence appeals to her sense of responsibility while challenging her instinct for anonymity. Rodriguez joins them as they complete their circuit of the base, her Master Sergeant stripes reflecting the recognition her competence has earned. Her partnership with Maria has created a comprehensive approach to security training that combines analytical thinking with practical implementation, theory with real-world application. Together, they have demonstrated that institutional change is possible when the right people commit to making it happen. The three of them represent different aspects of the transformation that has occurred at Fort Stewart. Maria brings the analytical insight that identifies threats. Rodriguez provides the institutional knowledge that implements solutions. And Crawford embodies the personal growth that makes lasting change possible. Their collaboration has created something greater than any of them could have achieved individually. Rodriguez shares intelligence about similar infiltration attempts at other installations. Operations that were detected and stopped using methods derived from Maria's analytical framework. The success stories continue to accumulate, each one representing lives protected and security maintained through the systematic application of her observational techniques. The national impact of her work becomes more apparent with each report. The conversation turns to the future of threat detection in an increasingly complex security environment. Technology continues to evolve, but human insight remains essential for identifying the subtle patterns that reveal hostile intentions. Maria's methods provide a bridge between technological capabilities and human intuition, creating comprehensive approaches to security that leverage both advantages. Crawford mentions his plans to retire from active duty but continue teaching in civilian capacity, his experience with failure and redemption making him uniquely qualified to help others avoid similar mistakes. His transformation from antagonist to advocate represents one of the most powerful aspects of Maria's influence, demonstrating that even the most resistant individuals can change when confronted with the consequences of their attitudes. The evening air carries the sounds of a base at rest, routine activities continuing under the protective umbrella of enhanced security awareness that Maria's work has created. The normalcy is deceptive, masking the sophisticated defensive systems that now operate beneath the surface of daily military life. Threats that would once have gone undetected now trigger multiple layers of response. Maria considers the implications of accepting the Institute proposal, understanding that public recognition would fundamentally change her ability to observe and analyze without being observed in return. The anonymity that has been her family's greatest asset would be sacrificed for the institutional permanence that could protect countless others. The trade-off requires careful consideration of both personal and professional factors. The conversation continues as they reach the memorial garden where Maria first laid flowers for the soldier her father had mentored, the promise that brought her to Fort Stewart and set in motion the chain of events that exposed Walsh's operation. The simple bouquet has been replaced by a small plaque acknowledging all personnel who have died protecting others, a reminder of the ultimate cost of service. Rodriguez expresses her support for whatever decision Maria makes, understanding that the choice involves considerations beyond career advancement or institutional recognition. The partnership they have built would continue regardless of official titles or formal structures, their shared commitment to protecting others transcending administrative arrangements. Crawford's endorsement of the Institute proposal carries particular weight given his initial opposition to Maria's involvement in security matters. His transformation from skeptic to advocate demonstrates the power of evidence and the importance of remaining open to perspectives that challenge existing assumptions. His support validates the institutional changes that Maria's work has created. The decision crystallizes as Maria realizes that her greatest impact has always come through teaching and empowering others rather than through individual achievement. The Institute would formalize this approach, creating a permanent structure for training personnel to recognize and respond to threats that conventional security measures might miss. The institutional legacy would honor her family's service while protecting future generations. Maria accepts the Institute proposal during a ceremony attended by military leadership from across the defense establishment, her words focusing on the collaborative nature of threat detection and the importance of remaining vigilant against complacency. The recognition acknowledges not just her individual contributions, but the broader lesson about listening to concerns regardless of their source. The Martinez Institute for Threat Recognition opens 6 months later, with Crawford as its first civilian instructor and Rodriguez as its military liaison, their combined experience creating a comprehensive curriculum that addresses both analytical techniques and implementation challenges. Students arrive from installations worldwide to learn methods that have proven effective in real-world applications. The Institute's first graduating class includes personnel who go on to identify and stop infiltration attempts at their home installations, validating the effectiveness of Maria's teaching methods and the importance of systematic threat recognition training. Each success story adds to the growing body of evidence that institutional change can create lasting improvements in security posture. Maria's office in the Institute overlooks the parade ground where military personnel conduct daily formations, their movements reflecting the discipline and awareness that her training has helped instill. The view serves as a constant reminder of the people her work protects and the responsibility that comes with the ability to see threats others cannot. The Institute's research division continues to refine and expand Maria's analytical methods, incorporating new technologies and adapting to evolving threat environments, while maintaining the fundamental principles of careful observation and systematic analysis. The work ensures that defensive capabilities continue to advance as hostile activities become more sophisticated. Crawford's classes on leadership and institutional humility become among the most popular offerings at the Institute, his honest discussion of past failures resonating with students who recognize similar challenges in their own experience. His transformation continues to serve as powerful testimony to the possibility of personal and institutional growth. Rodriguez's practical implementation workshops provide students with the tools necessary to translate analytical insights into effective security measures, bridging the gap between theoretical understanding and operational application. Her experience demonstrates that lasting change requires both vision and execution skills. The Institute's influence spreads through the military system, as graduates return to their assignments carrying new skills and perspectives that enhance security awareness at every level. The multiplier effect continues to expand, creating a network of trained observers who contribute to comprehensive threat detection capabilities. Maria's evening walks around the base now take her past the Institute building, where lights burn late into the night as students study techniques that could save lives and protect national security. The sight fills her with quiet satisfaction, knowing that her decision to accept public recognition has created something that will outlast her individual contribution. The memorial garden has grown to include recognition of all personnel who have contributed to base security, with a special section acknowledging civilian analysts whose observations have prevented security breaches. The expansion reflects the institutional recognition that threats can be identified by anyone willing to pay attention and report what they observe. The Institute's annual report documents continued success in threat detection and prevention, with graduates identifying infiltration attempts, security vulnerabilities, and suspicious activities that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. The systematic approach to training has created measurable improvements in defensive capabilities across multiple installations. Maria's apartment remains unchanged despite her new prominence, her lifestyle continuing to reflect the values her parents instilled regarding service and humility. She tends her herb garden each morning and reads novels in the evening, maintaining the routine that keeps her grounded while her professional influence continues to expand. The Institute has become a model for military education worldwide, with allied nations requesting access to curriculum and training methods that have proven effective in protecting against sophisticated threats. The international impact extends Maria's influence beyond American military installations to include global defense capabilities. Crawford's retirement ceremony acknowledges his transformation from failed leader to effective educator, his journey serving as inspiration for others who struggle with personal and professional challenges. His continued work at the Institute ensures that his experience contributes to ongoing improvements in military leadership and security awareness. Rodriguez's promotion to Sergeant Major recognizes her role in implementing institutional changes that have enhanced security posture throughout the defense establishment. Her career advancement validates the importance of competence and dedication over political connections or personal relationships. The Institute's success has attracted attention from academic institutions and think tanks interested in understanding how effective organizational change can be achieved in large bureaucratic systems. Maria's methods have become subjects of study for researchers interested in institutional transformation and threat recognition. The base's security posture continues to evolve as new challenges emerge and defensive capabilities adapt to meet them. The foundation Maria established through her analytical methods and training programs provides the flexibility necessary to address evolving threats while maintaining comprehensive awareness of potential vulnerabilities. Maria's legacy is measured not in personal recognition or career advancement, but in lives protected and threats prevented through the systematic application of observational skills and analytical thinking. The Institute bearing her family name ensures that future generations will benefit from lessons learned through careful attention to details that others might miss. The quiet strength that has always characterized her approach to service continues to influence everything the Institute accomplishes, demonstrating that lasting impact comes through empowering others rather than seeking individual recognition. Her choice to step into the light has illuminated paths for countless others to follow. The story continues in the lives touched by her teaching, the threats identified by her students, and the institutional changes that have made infiltration attempts visible long before they can achieve their objectives. Maria Martinez has shown that one person's careful observation can create ripple effects that protect thousands of others from dangers they never knew existed. Her father's watch ticks steadily against her wrist as she reviews reports from Institute graduates stationed around the world, each success story adding to the legacy of service that spans generations. The rhythm serves as a reminder that true honor is measured not by the recognition it receives, but by the protection it provides to those who serve alongside her. Where are you watching from? The question echoes through the Institute's halls as students learn to pay attention to their surroundings with the systematic approach that has proven so effective in identifying threats. Let us know what quiet vigilance means to you, because in a world where dangers often hide in plain sight, there is profound power in those who choose to watch, to learn, and to protect others through careful attention to the details that reveal hostile intentions. The Martinez Institute for Threat Recognition stands as testament to the understanding that security is everyone's responsibility. that threats can be identified by anyone willing to develop the skills necessary to see what others miss. Maria's story continues in every student who learns her methods, every threat that is identified before it can cause harm, every life that is protected through the application of systematic observation and analysis. The legacy lives on in every security check conducted with enhanced awareness, every unusual pattern that triggers appropriate investigation, every moment when someone chooses vigilance over complacency. Maria Martinez has demonstrated that quiet observation can be the most powerful weapon in the defense of freedom, that one person's dedication to seeing clearly can create protection for countless others who never know they were in danger. The letter arrives on a Thursday that feels like any other, until Maria opens the envelope bearing the seal of the President of the United States. The Presidential Unit Citation recognizes the Martinez Institute for preventing 17 separate infiltration attempts across 12 military installations in the past year alone. Each success represents lives protected and security maintained through the systematic application of observational techniques that have become standard training throughout the defense establishment. Maria sits in her office overlooking the parade ground where new recruits practice formations under the watchful eyes of instructors, who understand that awareness begins with attention to detail. The scene reminds her that protection starts with the willingness to see what others might dismiss as unimportant, to notice patterns that reveal intentions before those intentions can be acted upon. The Institute has grown beyond her original vision, expanding to include research divisions focused on emerging threats and international partnerships that share analytical methods with allied nations. The success has attracted scholars and practitioners from around the world, creating a center of excellence that influences security thinking far beyond military applications. Her morning routine remains unchanged, despite the recognition and responsibility that have transformed her professional life. She waters her herb garden while reviewing overnight reports from graduates stationed across the globe, each message adding to the growing catalog of threats identified and neutralized before they could cause harm. The simple act of tending plants grounds her in the understanding that growth requires patience and consistent attention. A knock on her door interrupts her reflection, revealing a young sergeant whose nervous energy immediately captures Maria's attention. Sergeant Lisa Thompson has completed the Institute's basic course and requested private consultation about observations at her new assignment that she cannot quite articulate but knows deserve investigation. Her instincts speak to the effectiveness of the training program and the importance of trusting analytical intuition. Thompson describes patterns of behavior at Fort Carson that individually seem innocuous but collectively suggest coordinated activity designed to avoid detection. Her description demonstrates the systematic thinking that the Institute curriculum emphasizes, the ability to recognize significant patterns within apparently routine activities. The quality of her analysis validates the educational approach that has proven so effective in creating defensive awareness. Maria listens with the patience her mother had taught her, understanding that the most important intelligence often comes from observers who lack the confidence to trust their own perceptions. Thompson's hesitation reflects not uncertainty about what she has observed, but doubt about whether her concerns will be taken seriously by superiors who may not understand the significance of subtle anomalies. The consultation continues as Thompson presents her documentation with a methodical approach that characterizes Institute graduates, each observation carefully recorded and analyzed for potential significance. Her work demonstrates that the analytical skills Maria teaches can be successfully transferred to personnel who lack extensive intelligence backgrounds but possess the dedication necessary to develop observational expertise. Maria recognizes immediately that Thompson has identified the early stages of an infiltration attempt similar to Walsh's operation but more sophisticated in its execution. The patterns suggest professional tradecraft and institutional knowledge that indicate foreign intelligence involvement rather than opportunistic crime or simple security negligence. The threat requires immediate attention from specialized counterintelligence personnel. The response mobilizes within hours, as Maria's assessment triggers protocols established specifically for situations where Institute graduates identify potential national security threats. Federal agencies coordinate with military intelligence to investigate Thompson's observations while maintaining operational security necessary to prevent the subjects from realizing they have been detected. Thompson's vindication comes swiftly as the investigation confirms her analysis and leads to the identification of 3 separate operatives who had been attempting to establish cover identities within the military system. Her careful observations had detected infiltration activities that conventional security measures had missed, demonstrating the practical value of the analytical training she had received. The success adds another chapter to the Institute's growing reputation for producing personnel capable of identifying threats that escape traditional detection methods. Thompson's experience becomes a case study used in advanced courses, illustrating how systematic observation and analysis can reveal hostile activities even when conducted by sophisticated professionals. Maria uses Thompson's consultation as an opportunity to refine training methods and update curriculum to address evolving threat patterns identified through real-world applications. The Institute's commitment to continuous improvement ensures that defensive capabilities advance as hostile techniques become more sophisticated and harder to detect through conventional means. The research division analyzes the Fort Carson operation to identify new indicators and warning signs that can be incorporated into training programs, ensuring that future graduates will be better prepared to recognize similar infiltration attempts. The systematic approach to learning from success stories enhances the Institute's effectiveness while contributing to broader counterintelligence capabilities. Crawford reviews Thompson's case during his leadership seminar, using her experience to illustrate the importance of supporting personnel who report unusual observations regardless of their rank or experience level. His discussion emphasizes that institutional prejudices can blind organizations to legitimate threats identified by observant individuals willing to speak up despite potential ridicule. Rodriguez coordinates with Fort Carson security personnel to implement enhanced awareness protocols based on lessons learned from Thompson's investigation, her practical experience enabling effective translation of analytical insights into operational improvements. The collaboration demonstrates how Institute principles can be integrated into existing security systems without disrupting normal operations. The international recognition continues to grow as allied nations request access to Institute training programs and analytical methods that have proven effective in identifying and preventing infiltration attempts. The global impact of Maria's work expands through partnerships that enhance collective security capabilities while maintaining operational security necessary for continued effectiveness. Maria's evening walks now take her past the expanded Institute complex, where additional buildings house research facilities and international training programs that serve personnel from dozens of countries. The growth represents the institutionalization of analytical methods that began with her individual observations, but have evolved into comprehensive educational and research capabilities. The Memorial Garden has been expanded again to include recognition of all personnel whose analytical work has contributed to threat prevention, creating a permanent reminder that security depends on the contributions of individuals willing to pay attention to details that others might overlook. The additions reflect the Institute's commitment to honoring those who serve in observation and analysis roles. Thompson visits the Institute for Advanced Training, designed to enhance her analytical capabilities and prepare her for assignment to specialized counterintelligence units that utilize graduates for particularly sensitive operations. Her career trajectory illustrates the professional opportunities available to personnel who develop expertise in systematic threat recognition and analysis. The annual conference brings together Institute graduates from around the world to share experiences and discuss emerging challenges in threat detection and security analysis. The gathering creates opportunities for cross-fertilization of ideas and methods while strengthening the professional network that has become one of the Institute's most valuable contributions to global security. Maria addresses the conference participants with remarks that emphasize the importance of remaining humble despite success, understanding that complacency represents the greatest threat to continued effectiveness in identifying and preventing hostile activities. Her words reflect lessons learned through years of experience in balancing confidence with caution. The presentation includes case studies from the past year that demonstrate both successes and near misses in threat detection, using real examples to illustrate principles and techniques while maintaining operational security necessary to protect ongoing operations. The educational approach ensures that lessons learned benefit the entire community of practice. Crawford's workshop on institutional resistance receives enthusiastic participation from attendees who have experienced similar challenges in convincing superiors to take their observations seriously. His honest discussion of past failures continues to resonate with personnel who face skepticism when reporting concerns that do not fit conventional threat models. Rodriguez leads tactical sessions that focus on implementing analytical insights within existing organizational structures, her experience providing practical guidance for overcoming bureaucratic obstacles that can prevent effective threat response. The training addresses real-world challenges that graduates face when returning to their operational assignments. The Institute's influence continues to expand through publications and research that contribute to academic understanding of threat recognition and organizational learning. Maria's methods have become subjects of scholarly study while maintaining their practical effectiveness in protecting military personnel from sophisticated infiltration attempts. The success stories continue to accumulate as graduates apply their training in increasingly diverse contexts, from traditional military installations to diplomatic facilities and civilian infrastructure that requires protection from hostile intelligence activities. The broad applicability of analytical methods demonstrates their value beyond purely military applications. Maria's legacy is measured in lives protected and threats prevented through the systematic application of observational skills that have become standard practice throughout the defense community. The institute bearing her family name ensures that future generations will benefit from educational programs that transform ordinary personnel into sophisticated threat recognition specialists. The quiet revolution she initiated continues to transform military culture, creating expectations that all personnel will contribute to security awareness through careful attention to their surroundings and systematic reporting of unusual activities. The cultural change represents a fundamental shift in how institutions approach threat recognition and prevention. Her father's watch continues to mark time as Maria reviews reports from around the world, each success story adding to the evidence that analytical thinking can be taught and that institutional change can create lasting improvements in security posture. The rhythm serves as a reminder that protection requires constant vigilance and continuous learning. The Martinez Institute for Threat Recognition stands as testament to the power of individual observation combined with institutional commitment to learning and improvement. Maria's story demonstrates that one person's dedication to seeing clearly can create educational systems that protect countless others from threats they never knew existed. The legacy lives on in every graduate who applies analytical skills to identify potential threats, every investigation that prevents hostile activities, every moment when systematic observation provides early warning of dangers that could otherwise cause catastrophic harm. Maria Martinez has shown that quiet vigilance, properly trained and institutionally supported, provides one of the most effective defenses against those who would do harm to others. Maria stands before the wall of photographs in the Institute's main hallway, each image representing a life saved or a threat neutralized through the analytical methods that began with her solitary observations in a supply depot. The faces look back at her with expressions of gratitude and determination, a visual reminder that individual awareness can multiply into collective protection when properly channeled through institutional commitment. 10 years have passed since Crawford dismissed her concerns in that humid Georgia security building, but the transformation extends far beyond personal vindication to encompass fundamental changes in how military organizations approach threat recognition and prevention. The culture shift represents a quiet revolution that has made infiltration attempts visible at every level of military operations. The morning briefing arrives from the Pentagon with statistics that would have seemed impossible during those early days when her warnings fell on deaf ears. 0 successful long-term infiltrations across all major military installations in the past 18 months, with 43 separate attempts detected and neutralized through systematic application of Institute training methods. Each success validates the decision to institutionalize analytical thinking as a core military competency. Her routine walk through the base reveals the depth of cultural transformation that has occurred without fanfare or dramatic announcements. Security personnel conduct their duties with enhanced awareness, their eyes trained to notice subtle patterns that would have escaped attention before Institute training became standard practice. The change is so complete that new personnel cannot imagine operating without systematic threat recognition capabilities. The international delegation arrives as scheduled, representatives from 15 allied nations seeking to establish similar institutes in their own defense establishments. The global expansion of analytical training represents the ultimate validation of methods that began with one woman's determination to trust her observations despite institutional resistance and personal ridicule. Crawford approaches as the delegation tours the facilities, his transformation complete in ways that continue to inspire personnel who knew him during his earlier incarnation as a barrier to progress rather than a facilitator of improvement. His presence serves as living proof that individuals and institutions can evolve beyond their initial limitations when confronted with evidence of better approaches. The tour includes the memorial wall dedicated to all personnel whose analytical work has prevented security breaches, their names etched in granite alongside brief descriptions of threats identified and neutralized through careful observation and systematic analysis. The memorial serves as permanent reminder that security depends on individual contributions that often go unrecognized until their absence reveals their true value. Rodriguez joins the group as they examine the training simulators that allow students to practice threat recognition in controlled environments designed to replicate real-world challenges. Her explanations demonstrate how theoretical understanding translates into practical application, bridging the gap between academic knowledge and operational effectiveness that characterizes the Institute's educational approach. The demonstration concludes with live exercises that showcase the analytical capabilities of recent graduates, their performance illustrating the transformation from routine military personnel to sophisticated threat recognition specialists. The observers witness systematic thinking in action, understanding how individual observations combine to create comprehensive threat assessments. Maria addresses the delegation with remarks that emphasize the collaborative nature of effective security, explaining how institutional support enables individual analytical capabilities while individual observations strengthen institutional defensive postures. Her words reflect lessons learned through years of experience in balancing personal expertise with organizational requirements. The questions from international representatives focus on implementation challenges and resource requirements, practical concerns that reflect serious consideration of establishing similar programs in their home countries. The interest validates the universal applicability of analytical methods, while highlighting the importance of adapting techniques to specific cultural and institutional contexts. Crawford's contribution to the discussion focuses on overcoming resistance to change within established bureaucratic structures, his experience providing valuable insights for leaders who must navigate political and institutional obstacles to implement comprehensive threat recognition programs. His transformation from obstacle to advocate lends credibility to recommendations for perseverance despite initial skepticism. Rodriguez addresses operational integration challenges, explaining how analytical capabilities can be incorporated into existing security systems without disrupting normal operations or creating excessive administrative burden. Her practical perspective helps visitors understand how theoretical improvements translate into manageable organizational changes. Each plane represented decades of technological advancement, but the fundamental challenge remained unchanged. Skilled humans operating complex machines in environments where excellence meant the difference between success and failure. The setting sun painted the Potomac River golden as Elena reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought her from mockery to legend. She had proven that assumptions could be dangerous, that age didn't determine capability, and that exceptional performance could overcome any disadvantage. Her story had inspired thousands of military aviators who faced their own challenges with outdated equipment or skeptical colleagues. Fighter pilots and air forces around the world carried her lessons into combat, achieving victories that might not have been possible without her tactical innovations. The museum began closing as Elena made her way toward the exit. She paused one final time beneath her suspended F-16, remembering the weight of the controls, the sound of the engine, the absolute clarity of purpose that had guided her through impossible odds. A young Air Force lieutenant approached nervously, recognizing Elena despite her civilian clothes. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm heading to my first fighter assignment next month, flying F-35s. But I've studied all your techniques. You showed us that the pilot still matters most." Elena shook the young officer's hand, seeing in her eyes the same determination that had carried Elena through months of professional adversity. "Remember that your aircraft is only as capable as you make it. Never let anyone tell you what's impossible." As Elena left the museum, she carried with her the satisfaction of knowing that her legacy would continue inspiring future generations long after her own flying days ended. The ancient F-16 would remain suspended in the museum as a permanent reminder that excellence transcends technology, that human skill remains paramount, and that individual achievement can change entire organizations. The Washington traffic moved at its usual glacial pace, but Elena didn't mind the delay. She used the time to call her parents, sharing news of the museum visit and the continuing evolution of the Innovation Center. They had attended every awards ceremony, beaming with pride as their daughter received recognition for achievements they had always known she was capable of. Her phone buzzed with messages from former students, now serving around the world. Crawford's retirement ceremony takes place in the Institute's main auditorium, his farewell address acknowledging the personal growth that began with recognizing his failure to listen to legitimate concerns and continued through years of learning to become a better leader and educator. His journey from antagonist to advocate provides inspiration for others who struggle with similar challenges. Rodriguez assumes expanded responsibilities as the institute prepares for its next phase of growth. Her promotion to senior positions reflecting recognition of competence and dedication that transcends traditional advancement patterns. Her career trajectory illustrates how institutional change creates opportunities for individuals whose capabilities had been previously undervalued or overlooked. The annual report documents measurable improvements in security posture across all military installations where institute graduates serve in analytical roles, with threat detection rates increasing dramatically while false alarm rates decrease through improved discrimination between genuine concerns and routine anomalies. These statistics validate the scientific approach to developing observational skills. Maria's influence continues to expand through academic partnerships that integrate analytical thinking into civilian educational programs, extending threat recognition capabilities beyond military applications to include protection of critical infrastructure and sensitive civilian facilities. The broader impact demonstrates universal applicability of systematic observational methods. The Institute's research division publishes findings that contribute to scholarly understanding of threat recognition and organizational learning, their work influencing academic thinking while maintaining practical focus on improving defensive capabilities. The combination of theoretical rigor and operational effectiveness distinguishes the Institute's contributions to security studies. The Memorial Garden hosts an annual ceremony honoring all personnel whose analytical work has contributed to threat prevention, creating opportunities for graduates to connect with the broader community of practice, while reinforcing commitment to continued vigilance and improvement. The gathering strengthens professional bonds while celebrating collective achievements. Maria's legacy extends beyond personal recognition to encompass fundamental changes in how military institutions approach security challenges, creating expectation that all personnel will contribute to threat awareness through systematic observation and analysis. The cultural transformation represents lasting improvement in defensive capabilities that will protect future generations. Her father's watch continues to mark time as she prepares for another day of teaching and mentoring personnel who will carry analytical skills to assignments around the world. The rhythm serves as a reminder that protection requires constant attention, and that individual contributions multiply through institutional commitment to excellence and continuous improvement. The Martinez Institute for Threat Recognition stands as testament to the power of systematic thinking combined with institutional support for individual initiative. Maria's story demonstrates that one person's determination to see clearly and speak truthfully can create educational systems that protect countless others from threats they never knew existed. The quiet strength that has always characterized her approach continues to influence everything the Institute accomplishes, proving that lasting impact comes through empowering others rather than seeking personal recognition. Her choice to step forward when duty demanded has created protection that extends far beyond what any individual could achieve alone. Her Honda Camry remains in the parking lot with its reliable engine and careful maintenance, a reminder that outward appearances rarely reflect inner capabilities or true worth. She drives home through streets made safer by the analytical capabilities of personnel trained to recognize threats before they can cause harm. Her influence invisible, but undeniably present. The story continues in every graduate who applies systematic thinking to identify potential dangers. Every threat neutralized before it can cause harm. Every moment when careful observation provides early warning that prevents catastrophic consequences. Maria Martinez has shown that quiet vigilance, properly trained and institutionally supported, provides effective defense against those who would harm others. Where observation meets determination, protection follows. The lesson echoes through institute halls where students learn that anyone can develop the analytical skills necessary to see what others miss. That institutional change begins with individuals willing to trust their observations despite skepticism or ridicule. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.